And I'm going to hit the go live button on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I don't know exactly how this started because there's like a 20-second lag. So everyone watching, be aware of that. If you ask us a question, we will see it, but it will be 20 seconds, at least 20 seconds delayed before we can respond.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming. This is Tavern Talk, episode 1 of Tavern Talk. I forgot to get the music started, so let me just get that going in. I've got a beer. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm prepared.
Whiskey.
Okay.
Oh, here we are.
Hey, what time is it for you, Eric?
2. It's fine.
It's a Sunday.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Tavern Talk. The idea for this is we're gonna try and do a 1 hour kind of breakdown of each of our episodes after we've like 1 or 2 weeks after, maybe 3 weeks after we've recorded them. Try and get. So I'll always been there because it's gonna be some GM feedback or some of my GMing thoughts. Also try and always get at least one player on to have a chat as well, to just kind of find out what the players thought, and also do it live streaming like we're doing now, so that if people have any questions about the session they can also ask. So if you're not watching this live, you're watching this later, they will be on our channel. So if you click on our little channel icon, you can see where I don't know if I'm going to be scheduling them with every session, but they will be going up roughly 2 or 3 weeks before, and we'll be posting about it on social media and stuff as well. Anyway, so that's what this is, Tavern Talk. Yeah, and as I just said, people who are here watching live, thank you very much for coming, and just go ahead in the YouTube chat there, ask us any questions if you've got any.
I feel like we
and
should
we'll
synchronize
address
when
them.
we say Tavern Talk. Just at the very beginning. Like, Tavern Talk.
Oh no, that ain't happening.
Well,
That can go wrong. That
Yeah.
can go so wrong.
good.
So the first thing I wanted to kind of mention, I've been watching the episode 1 back a little bit, and having spent a huge amount of time getting all the technology and everything working, it was a little bit annoying to see that the playback wasn't so great. There were some skips, some pauses with the video. The audio was more or less okay, but not perfect. And I've since looked into how to improve that in OBS, the overlay software I'm using, so that hopefully we'll be doing better. And this video now I've tweaked my settings, so it should be good. The downside to that is that we're now doing 720p videos, if that means anything to you, so slightly less resolution, but I think for an actual play, that's okay. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was my prep for this session. I'll probably start each of our Tavern Talks also talking about prep. Just because a lot of people are usually interested in that. The book, by the way, for Forbidden Lands does say that you shouldn't be spending more than about 15 minutes prepping for each session, which, if you're running it pure sandbox, that is certainly possible. However, for running an official campaign like Raven's Purge, which I am running, if you're planning on using any of the published adventure sites, you definitely need more than 15 minutes. You need to familiarize yourself with that, and make sure you've got everything to hand that you need, etc., because you don't want to be reading about that and running it off the cuff at the table. However, I knew I wasn't going to be introducing an adventure site in episode 1. Episode 1 was, and also because this is more of an educational type of actual play, I did want to focus on explaining rules, which is why we spent so much time journeying and looking at that side of the game. So my prep really was focused on, in terms of gameplay focus, my focus was on rolling encounters in advance. So there are random encounter tables. Every time the party move into a new hex, there's a random table that's rolled on to see if any encounters happen. And there's a 50% chance that there will be no encounter. But if you're rolling in the other 50%, then you got this big table to say what happens depending on the terrain and everything. So yeah, you can do that. You can do that like live. You can do that at the table. But for me, I don't want to be reading. Each of those entries has a half of a column of text in the book, roughly. Some of them have a full column, and I don't want to be reading them and trying to familiarize myself with them because I don't have them memorized. just to help speed up gameplay. Similarly, when I've run Mutant Year Zero, I also rolled up zones in advance and had them kind of queued up and ready to go. So I've done exactly the same thing here. It worked pretty well in practice, I think. So yeah, that was a big thing I did in advance. Go on, Eric.
One question about that, Matt. Like, how do you handle different terrain types? So not knowing necessarily where your players are going to go.
Well, I did know where you were going to go.
Yeah.
Well, in this instance,
well,
because
in this instance, yeah, you absolutely did.
Because
I'm just saying,
you're
like,
falling-
that's one
yeah.
potential.
Sure. So, there are ways where I think about this as well when I was actually rolling them.
Yeah.
In this instance, I knew that you were following the trail of the Saurians. I knew where I wanted the Saurians to be heading into the forest. And therefore, I rolled kind of, a number of times on plains and a number of times on the forest. And I think I rolled 3 actual encounters rather than like nothing happening. And for one of them, I looked up the entry in both the plains and the forest to see basically if I could do this, if I could do kind of one or the other. But really, it doesn't matter because the entries are kind of overlap quite a bit.
Yeah.
Right. So this is where we used 2 of the encounters from the book. So one of the encounters from the book was the walking armor, which kind of happened on the plains fairly early on. And the second encounter that I rolled up was the corpse that Lyria went and fondled, which which required her to make an instant stamina roll. So we'll see what happens with that in episode 2. But that is another encounter from the encounter table that I rolled up.
Kind of handily answered Creative Atrophy's question.
Yeah, so Creative Atrophy is asking, do you make your own encounters or riff off the published ones?
So this is where I've been considering making my own encounter tables or adding my own encounters to the existing ones, because I know both Eric and Ed have run or are running Forbidden Lands, which means they have
done it once.
Okay, you've done it once. Well, Eric is currently running it,
right? Yeah, I
think they are. Yeah. So I'm kind of cognizant that some of my players might recognize some of the encounters. So I'm kind of, I don't know. I'm tempted to make my own or put a spin on the existing ones. Saying that, I could just ask Eric which encounters he's experienced, and then I could kind of cross them off in the book. So if I roll them up.
So that's a really good question, right? Because there's some I've experienced, some I've read. I'll say that with the walking armor, I didn't recognize it at first. I actually had no idea what I was looking at. And it was only after the lower roll when I was like, oh. So, yeah. Someone who's sort of running the game, I kind of do both. To sort of answering what Creative Atrophy is saying is that sometimes like I have an idea for something that's going to be more fitting with like the narrative where my players are going, and I'll say, okay, so there's an encounter rolled, and I'll throw in this other idea in here, right? Whereas if there was no encounter, I might just leave it out or something like that. Or sometimes I use positive results on encounter rolls to just change the weather or something like that.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, there are a number of different ways you can do it.
There's another really good one is as we get further into the campaign, we will be generating backstory that's relevant to the campaign, and I can kind of just come up with people that you might encounter some people that are tangential to something that's happened, or let's say you went to a village and the village had been burnt down, you help them out. Maybe you'll come across a trading caravan from that village where they're getting themselves back up on their feet and they'll give you some freebies or something. Those sorts of encounters, or you piss some group off and they are tracking you or something and they ambush you or something. It could be something like that.
Exactly.
So that becomes a lot easier to do on the fly later on in the campaign, which is why I'm not so keen on necessarily creating a bunch of just random ones on my own. Also, it's worth mentioning that if people haven't watched Session 0, we used this the Legends and Adventures booklet to randomly generate characters, and there's a lot of kind of juicy background detail in there for each of the players, so I can actually tap into that. I can tap into dark secrets and stuff to also come up with stuff if I need to. So if I'm rolling encounters and let's say I don't roll the single encounter for that session, I'll be like, well, I probably want at least one. Then I would I would either just pick one from the book, or I would look at people's backstories and things and see if there's an applicable one that might come up. Anyway, so that's one big one. Especially that took a little bit more prep just to think around and to think about how I wanted to do it, because I knew journeying was going to be a big thing and there'd be quite a few hexes being traveled. The second thing I did was I looked at the stats for the Saurians just in case they managed to come across them early on, and I would need them for some sort of combat. So I had them. I have a OneNote notebook where I keep everything, and I had made sure I had the Saurian stats in there. And the final thing
for session 2.
Oh yeah, I've gotten ready for session 2 exactly.
Yeah.
And the final thing is that I reread the journeying rules, the chapter on journeying in the player's handbook. Just because I knew it was going to be a main focus, I'm going to make sure I was kind of up to speed on it. When I say I reread it, I skimmed it. But I also skimmed the start of the encounter. So it's kind of, they go hand in hand. The journeying chapter and the encounter, the start of the encounter chapter in the Game Master's Guide, kind of cover the same territory, but they don't overlap. So you kind of have to read them both in conjunction. Anyway, so that was my prep. Yeah. I'm not going to wait 25 seconds, whatever it is, for people to ask if they have any questions about it. So if you have any questions about it, go ahead and pop them into the chat, and I'll come back to it.
Yeah, you might know that when I ran it, I purposely didn't look at any adventure sites or anything like that. I pretty much did an off-the-cuff thing with humans and I think an ogre. That was it.
Cool.
Yeah, that was my... knowing that I was going to play this, I thought, well,
okay, cool.
I'd rather have everything be brand new. So I thought, yeah, I'm really going to look. I've got my book, I've got my box set, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to not read that.
I know Charlotte's read the book as well. I don't know if how much she's run, if she's run anything. I don't think she has run anything.
I don't think she has.
But she has read. I'm pretty sure she has read the Game Master's Guide. So. Anyway, but that's not such a big deal. Like, if someone's read all the encounters, I don't really mind, because they're not going to necessarily remember them, especially considering we're only playing once a month.
Or recognize them.
No, exactly. But Eric's the one that I'm a bit more worried about, because he's actively running it. So, anyway.
I'm not doing Raven's Purge, though, so all those adventure sites, I know nothing.
So the second thing to talk about is what we're calling Trousergate. And the famous trouser scene. I mean, it was more than a scene. We had Kark's trousers get ripped in the crotch. I listened back, and I'm the one who suggested it, having mentioned that it happened to me recently. We talked about trousers being ripped. I was like, actually, my crotch got ripped, and then that was it. Yeah, I kind of killed the tone I wanted to set for the first episode. I wanted it to be a little bit more tense. I wanted it to feel a little bit darker, and it very much felt like it felt very comfortable. We all had fun, I think. But it didn't have quite the right tone I wanted it to have. So after the session, I felt a little bit down about it, and was kind of like, man, it really, mainly because of that stupid fucking trouser thing, which I suggested. It's like
I quite like the fact that it's a little lighthearted to start with, because I'm sure it'll get dark as we go along. So,
and that's
because we're kind of enjoying ourselves, and obviously we're trying to get used to ourselves. I think it's quite a good way of kind of bonding ourselves together, and then before we know it, we'll all be sort of like in the corner, rocking backwards and forwards.
Indeed. Well, that's the hope, right? Or at least some interesting criticals.
Yes.
At least some interesting criticals.
Definitely.
But yeah, anyway, so I just wanted to kind of mention that, like, if people are thinking about that, if people are quite like that, that's probably not the tone I'm going for going forward. I've had a chat to everyone behind the scenes, all the players, and mentioned that I was a bit down about it, and that held my hands up. I wasn't like blaming anyone, and just saying like part of it was nerves. That was the first time I'd ever live streamed as a GM ever. I've been GMing a long time, and I've never live streamed before, and I felt a lot of pressure as well, which made me, I think, embrace the silliness a little bit more than I normally would.
Sure.
It's a comfortable default, because I know all the players. I've gamed, or I've met all the players before, other than Eric, but I've chatted with Eric a lot on Discord, so I kind of felt like I knew everyone really well, or I had played with everyone before, so it was kind of easy for me to slip into more of a home group style of tone, more, or you would call it beer and pretzels or whatever. But yeah, that's going to change. So just kind of want to get that out of the way as well and talk about, just kind of briefly mention it. The other thing, like just talking about it, like what are some things that I could have done differently? The crafting roles. And this is kind of the next thing I wanted to talk about.
Crafting gate.
Craft gate.
Crafting gate.
You know, there were how many attempts? Two, I think. 2 attempts to...
It's 2 or 3, I think it was.
I think 2 attempts to craft a simple rip in a pair of trousers, and they both failed. Pushing happened, and no successes. And it's like, great, these, you know, this running trouser gag is going to keep going.
It just keeps. Yeah,
and in hindsight, it would have probably been better to just make a ruling as a GM and just say, you know what, you spend an entire quarter day and you stitch those trousers up, just to kind of get rid of that little tone breaker and get things back on track as I wanted them to be.
Yeah.
However,
on the positive side, we did learn a little bit about crafting from it.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. That's the thing. Like this is meant to be an educational.
We should have been
one.
rolling at all. Like we should have just not been able to do it. And so I think that brings it into the simple and advanced item crafting topic if we want to go there.
So I'm going to flash something up here on the screen, which is the wrong page, of course. So let me just bring that up.
After that, I kind of went back to the book because I was a little bit kind of, why does this not work? How can this be?
Yeah.
And then after reading it, I was still a little unclear until we had a bit of a chat in Discord, and then obviously presumably this is what's going to happen with Matt putting this up.
Yeah. So basically, this is the page from the book. I've got the PDF open here. Simple, advanced, and advanced items.
Because the page before it tells you that if you're repairing something, it only takes a few hours, but then that one. Yeah,
exactly. So this is page 52 in the book, by the way. And it's basically, it just says simple and advanced items. All items in the game fall into 2 categories, simple and advanced. Simple is basically trousers, right?
Actually, it'd be advanced. No, I mean, that's an advanced.
Well,
under clothes, so you need the tailor talent to even do it.
Well,
although, isn't that for crafting, not for repairing?
It's for both. So
it is for
either
repairing,
craft or repair, like you need the necessary. Yeah. So like we could craft like rags to put on him.
But it's actually
right? That takes no talent. We could do that.
I don't think that's quite right, because it's saying every item in the gear list is categorized, and I think if you looked up like regular clothes, it would not be under advanced.
Oh, it is.
I think it says if there's a profession skill behind it, I think then it's advanced. If there's a dash, I think that means you're supposed to be able, anyone could do it.
Yeah, so simple clothes, fine garments, they all require tailor. The only thing that doesn't is rags.
The weird thing, I was looking at that, and apparently you don't need any skill to create barrels.
Oh, that's interesting.
And there's a couple of other weird ones. I was like,
because I had checked on the staff actually before we had started, and I saw that it didn't require a talent. So I was like, oh well, I should try to do that. And this is my point to be like, oh man, I'm sorry, because I had pushed that original roll, which then set a precedent for the rest of the session, and that was completely the wrong thing to do. And because I don't really think this is something you could push, and something that sort of backs that up is there's another rule where if you're crafting an item and you want to take longer to do it, you get bonuses.
Skill.
Yeah. And so that's completely the opposite of pushing something where you're trying to you're doing something for hours. I'm not sure how you push something for hours. And then beyond that, you actually get bonuses for taking even longer to do it, which seems to me the exact opposite of the idea of pushing to begin with. Right. So yeah, I felt like I had set that wrong tone from the beginning.
Well, don't worry about it. I mean, I could have just made a ruling in this instance and say, look, you've made 2 attempts, you fix it. Or even after the first attempt, you've spent long enough, it's a simple tear. It's not like anything major. You've got needle and thread, you can do it. Although did anyone have
which
needle
we don't
and thread?
Have. Yeah. If we even had that, it would help. What were we doing to repair it? This is a great question.
So that's why Trousergate happened, is people are trying to mend these trousers without needle and thread. It's like, what are you thinking?
Anyway.
Yeah, so we wanted to bring that up and talk about the kind of crafting rules because we looked at it. The other thing to talk around is pushing, which, if you're not familiar, in Forbidden Lands, pushing is basically means re-rolling. And it kind of came up a little bit, and I wanted to talk about, because this comes up in the communities constantly. People are asking for clarification on when you can push. Can you push for little things? Can you push for journeying, etc.? And really, there's a fairly simple way of looking at it, and the way of looking at it is, well, according to the errata, the latest errata, which is on page 44, if you've got a PDF now, it says for roles where you have a success, you can only push if your additional successes will produce some additional effect, right?
Okay.
So it really depends on the context. But the idea is if you only need a single success and getting 2 successes doesn't really do anything else, then you can't push the roll. You got a success. No. You can't really farm that roll out for more willpower points because why are you pushing yourself to breaking point for something that you've already succeeded at? Kind of makes sense. Yeah. So
I quite obviously there's that little box very similar to the crafting thing about saying don't roll too often and only push for things that are, under stressful conditions or will be sort of like something that is absolutely required. That makes sense. Rather than I'll push every time I make camp.
That's the way to think about not rolling. When do you not or when do you not allow push rolls? Yeah. And I didn't really mention it during the episode, but I had to look back on Discord to see if in the Year Zero Worlds Discord server whether anyone had actually come across a nice and tidy way of doing it. I think Eric, this was you again. Had basically summarized it as saying you don't roll for passive rolls. So this is basically if you're not actively doing something, then you don't get to push it. So a good example is rolling scouting. If someone's sneaking up on you, you don't know that person is sneaking up on you. You can't push the roll. That's kind of gaming the system of it. If the GM says, "Can you make me a scouting roll, please?" and you're like, "Why?" "Oh, I'm not going to tell you." It's like, "Okay, I failed that. I'm going to push it." Well, no. You can't push that because you don't know what you're doing. Like this is like passive perception, if you want to think of it like that.
I guess the difference would be if you're like in a snowstorm and you're trying to find out the bandits that are chasing you. Then you could do one, presumably.
Sure.
Because at that point,
if you're actively doing it, right?
Situation and actually,
So if you think there are bandits coming and you're actively like seeking them out or searching for their tracks or something, then it's kind of like the tables are. So it's kind of like who's the active party and who's the passive party.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And they make there's a distinction made. I think it's in the player's handbook that this is like it's the difference between say like a passive scouting roll and a parry, right?
Yeah.
You can push a parry. Why? Because it takes one of your actions in a combat. Like you are actively doing something.
Don't get hit.
Exactly, right. And so like there are other ways that like philosophically I've kind of stretched that out. So like I don't do pushes for like resist against cold, for example.
Yeah.
Because like for one, the person that'd be rolling against you, the attacker in this case, is the cold, so it could push and you can't, but that doesn't make any sense. No one pushes in that, you're either cold or you're not. So this is these sorts of things.
Yeah.
I also have done like just a flat rule, like if it's a journeying rule.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Don't do any pushes for those.
Creative Attributes just asked, would you allow pushing for making camp or hunting? Some of those mishaps are kind of nasty. I think we discussed that, didn't we? In the last
we said no.
where...
We said no in episode 1, or I said no, and I stand by that. I think
I do no pushing for those.
And again, though, didn't we say that unless your life depended on it?
I think even that.
But there could be an argument made for that. Maybe I'd be a bit more lenient if you were starving and you were you'd foraged like for 2 days and had no luck. Then maybe I would say like in certain circumstances, and I could see that you would push yourself to the breaking point to find food or to find water because you're gonna die otherwise. That's different. You guys all had the consumable dyes for stuff. You're just trying to like find stuff. then no. Making camp, certainly not from making camp. Again, maybe unless you had failed to make camp for like 4 nights in a row, you were endlessly sleepy and you're like delirious or something, then maybe I could. But yeah, how do you push to make camp? I don't see that. Hunting, I think there's an argument maybe for like foraging or even for hunting, or maybe fishing, not so much. Maybe I don't know. No, I don't know. It feels kind of passive to me.
I don't like pushing for journey rolls.
It's like how do you push yourself to find the foraging stuff? It's like you either find it or you don't.
If you're out looking for food, if there's no food, there's no food. You can't like make
exactly.
Food.
So my generally you wouldn't be allowed to roll for it. I was just saying like maybe I can think of some instances when you could, but I don't think that would be the case.
I mean, I think in cases like that, I would be more interested in seeing like what sort of creative solutions people come up with, and maybe be a bit more lenient with that.
Yeah.
Rather than like mechanical pushing.
Because dying by starvation, I mean, it's kind of cool to die
it's
by
actually hard
starvation.
to die by starvation.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I'm sure we can give it a go.
I don't even know if I've seen a player like a PC be hungry yet.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like people are pretty good at like keeping.
I mean, you can definitely die from it, right? Because it's this
It takes a long time though.
It's this what's it called?
What I did like is that once it starts going wrong,
damage,
it kind of like snowballs very much.
Yeah,
like
absolutely. Yeah, you could snowball
in real life.
Yeah, but yeah, in the game, I still haven't seen it yet. I mean, maybe you would like if you're sticking true to the no pushing for journey rolls. It's possible you might start to see it. Let's find out.
Well, I'm sure we will.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing is, journeying will probably be an element of most of our sessions, but probably not. It's not going to be central, I don't think, to this. Potentially, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I don't want to predict anything.
One of the things will be the more we get used to it, the more we'll be going, right, I'll make the roll for doing this.
Yeah.
Harry will be making the roll for that. We'll kind of do that, and we'll go through the days, and it'll be quite quick, and it'll just be a matter of some dice rolls.
And I think you prepare. Like I think there are a lot of aspects of this game that you can sort of emphasize more without pushing during journeying, right? Like proper equipment, relevant talents. I don't think anybody playing with pushing during journeying would ever take like the quartermaster talent or something. But yeah, if you suddenly need these dice, like you sort of emphasize like all these other talents that suddenly become way more useful, having the right equipment, being better prepared. And that's kind of, it's in the spirit of the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
So definitely. And also things like horses, for example. If you want to travel more quickly, to get to some destination, then having horses is really going to mean that the journeying mechanics are still going to be there, but they're not going to come into play as much as they would normally, because you're moving through things. You're moving through the hexes so much faster.
Really quickly, yeah.
And having a pack animal to carry all the extra gear that you suddenly need because you need it. Yeah.
Well, 2 pack animals, right?
I think Nanny's a riding animal.
I mean, technically, Nanny is a mount, which means she
can be used as
4 times strength. 4 times Harry's strength. Oh no. 4 times her own strength. Her own strength in kind of inventory slots, so she can actually carry quite a lot. We're thinking Nanny goat is a very large goat, like a giant goat, kind of fantasy breed. Okay, next thing to talk around is the hostile animal rule, and I'm going to bring this up because this is something everyone forgot when we were running it. And it's on page 58 of the player's handbook. But there's a little bit here which I've got kind of circled there. I didn't put it on the stream. There we go. Yeah, it says tame wild animals. This is on the animal handling skill. When you encounter a wild animal, you can attempt to discourage it from attacking by communicating on a primal level. You must be at close range or closer, and you must be aware of the animal's presence. Roll an opposed roll for animal handling against the animal's strength. Larger animals are harder to frighten off. Well, we had exactly that.
Great sense.
And we didn't use that. So, thankfully for Eric, for your character,
for the rest
we
of us.
didn't use it. Because I think bears are pretty strong, right?
I think it's like 6 strength is the default. You rolled it, right? Like we did a hypothetical in the Discord after, and I didn't die.
You didn't. I failed the roll, so it would have worked anyway. Yeah, so that's just something to bear in mind. One thing that we kind of checked up on. So that's if people are interested in like how would you run something similar in your own game. That's how you do it. Use animal handling. That actually was not a scripted encounter that I'd prepared in advance. I just thought they're making a lot of noise in the woods. They're not particularly trying to be stealthy or anything like that. And you've made camp with a fire, so it's bound to attract something. And then I can't remember exactly if I rolled a d6 or something to see if anyway.
You're just like, bears are fun.
Bears are fun. Well, bears are also like, if you think about camping, like a solitary bear would definitely go up to a camp where there's food, like you're all carrying food and stuff. It would definitely be curious, like, oh, what's this going on? And it was a springtime, so there would be a hungry bear.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it makes
so it kind of worked in my head. I just kind of ran with it. So yeah. Anyway,
next
that was
time we
one.
hang the food up in a tree.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the donkey.
I mean, hanging. Yeah. Yeah. And the goat. Yeah, that might not be so easy.
And cock.
So that's actually one thing that the rules don't really address. And I've seen this. I've seen people ask about this in the past on the various communities, which is when you have someone keeping watch, how do you know whether anything's going to happen or not? Because there are no random tables. There's no roll required for keeping watch to see if something happens or not. It's completely up to the GM to decide whether during a period where the party are sleeping and one person's keeping watch, that something happens or not. And that's basically what I did. I kind of used my discretion and thought, okay, they've been traveling for 4 or 5 days now, or for two or 3 days, sorry. Yeah. Well, if you count the very first time you met, I think it was like your third night. And yeah, it was like, well, sure, they're in a forest now. They got all this stuff. They're making a fire. Something's gonna come. So those are the sorts of things that happen. And I wanted to keep it kind of not make it into like a group of some sort of sentient race that was coming by, or sentient kin, as this game calls them. I wanted to keep it a little bit more wildernessy, just so we could kind of move the plot along a bit and kind of just show how the journeying rules work. So
it's quite good because we're in the middle of nowhere, and that's the sort of thing you'd probably be worrying about, rather than a potentially random bunch of, I don't know,
orcs or something,
orcs come traipsing through. Actually, it's more likely that you're going to be
at
upset
night
by a bear or a badger or something like that that's going to cause trouble.
Or goblins, they can see in the dark. So
Can't trust goblins.
But why would they be in there? What? Hey, we'll see. We'll see what happens in a future episode.
We have a goblin in those woods, so
we do have a goblin in those woods, but not staying up at night.
He's our goblin.
Okay. The last thing we wanted to talk about, really, before kind of turning it over to any listener or live watching questions, is the half-elf psychic power talent. I'm gonna just kind of show what's in the PDF on this one. I
don't know anything about this. So.
This is Charlotte's character. Charlotte is playing a half-elf sorcerer, which is one of those typical kind of tropish archetypes for Forbidden Lands, because the power they get, which is what I'm showing here, the talent that they get for that kin, is called psychic power. And basically what it means is any time that you spend a willpower point, you get to count it as the first one counts as 2, right? Okay. So you get like a free willpower point every time you use it.
So now, you're basically powering your spells, or
but if you're playing a half-elf hunter or a half-elf fighter or something, it's very different to if you're playing a half-elf sorcerer or druid, because of how the magic works. So I just want to kind of talk around this. So that's the thing, is you basically just bear that in mind, that it counts as 2. The first one counts as 2. Let's go look at the magic page then, which is just flashing up on the screen. And on the magic chapter, this is how magic works, right? You don't roll to cast a spell. It's always considered to be cast. But you do roll a number of dice to see if you have any mishaps, or if you are able to overcharge it, right?
Right.
So, and the number of dice you roll is the number of willpower points you've spent.
Right.
If any skulls come up, which are ones on the base die,
Yep.
you're gonna have some sort of magical mishap. So you don't have any the minimum that Charlotte's character can, the minimum number of willpower points that she can use to use any kind of magic is going to be 2 willpower points.
Right.
So she's at a higher risk of miscasting every time she uses magic, but at the same time she also has a higher risk of also has a higher chance of overcharging.
And her spells by default are more powerful, just generally.
Definitely, yeah. And the magical mishap, I've kind of put that in a kind of put a little red square around that as well. It basically, as you can see there, it says if you roll 1 or several skulls when you cast, you unleash powerful forces. Roll d66 on the table on the next page, and basically that's it. If you get, there's this as you can kind of see here, there's this like magical mishap table with it's not quite like 30 a full 36 results, but it's there are quite a few different ways it can go. The higher you roll, the worse things happen.
I'll just look at 66.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, 66 is good. 66 is you become an NPC because you've been changed. So yeah, that's kind of a little interesting rule there to do with magic. We'll see. I actually don't know if Charlotte has any willpower points. I think she
maybe not yet.
I think she might have 1 possibly.
Okay. So it's if I can give like some background on this. Apparently, several months ago, I asked on the Free League forums about this talent, right? Because I had a player at the time who was a half elf, and like we were trying to figure out because this makes mishaps more common or harder to avoid. Like you can save cast if you have like a grimoire, you're casting at a lower spell level than your talent, you can mitigate it, right? But it's harder for a half elf than others. You can still do it, but it's harder. So I was asking about this on the forums, and apparently Tomas, the lead designer, answered me that the way they intended it was that you can choose whether or not to use it, which is super confusing because if you look at the text of the talent, it does not seem like you have any choice in the matter whatsoever. And so this came up again on the Year Zero Worlds Discord recently, and it led to this ridiculous conversation where I'm arguing against myself from like 6 months ago, and this guy is bringing up my posts. Shout out to Fenhorn. Yeah, he's bringing up my posts from like 6 months ago, and I'm like, well, I guess that's what I thought at the time, or so like I had to wrestle with this problem all over again. And like I have to say, like, no matter sort of what Tomas says, sorry Tomas, like I just feel like it'd be kind of cooler if it's required that you get this extra willpower point.
I could do this is my game, right, as a GM.
I mean, it's absolutely. I'm just saying like the background of why why I brought this up for a topic for today.
I think the way we'd do it is for oh god, I don't know. I'm trying to think of instances when I would possibly allow the choice of only using 1. But I like the flavor of it. I like the fact that half elves are more attuned to sort of this magical plane, and that means that they are channeling more of this magic than anyone else can because they're just like so attuned to it. And that means even if they're doing something small, they're risking like
something bigger,
a mishap, or overcharging it or whatever. It's cool flavor. Like I don't really want to play that down. I don't think I want to give that option.
Not an option to take 2 instead of 1.
But also, it's not really fair to kind of exclude Charlotte from this conversation too. So
of course,
I'll point her to this. I'll point her to this video, and even if she can't watch the whole thing, then just to the timestamp of when we're talking about it and see how she feels about it. But I think from my perspective, it's kind of more. There's more role playing gold by keeping it to the kind of strict interpretation of the rules. So. That's the way I'm kind of leaning towards doing it. So
it also means that half elf sorcerers potentially really powerful. and it just means that
that's a trade-off, right?
Explode.
But the thing is, like, if you want to do something really small with like limited effect, you want to use one of the, they're not called, what are they called? Not cantrips, but general spells, I think they're called. So there's a bunch of general spells that all sorcerers and druids have access to, and I'm just gonna actually quickly pull them up. Let me put this on the stream as well. So it's just like on the next page, I think. General spells. So magical seal, sense magic, dispel magic, obscure magic, bind magic, transfer. At different ranks, right? So rank 1, for example, magical seal, which is here on the next page. You can protect a person or location from magic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah. I don't know. Sensing magic, you need a divining rod. Or I think if you have the divining rod, it's easier to cast.
It's more powerful.
Yeah, you can sense when somebody's using magic within short range. I don't know. Like, those are...
sort of,
I don't know. Maybe there's an argument to be made for them.
Magic one as well.
Yeah, at a higher rank, right? Rank 2.
I think... Isn't Counterspell
Magic's 2.
Rank 1?
No.
I was in 2.
Dispel magic.
2.
Dispel in 2. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually it's not, it's...
Yeah, anyway.
But you can cast at talent rank 1 if you want an automatic mishap.
yeah, definitely. And that's the other thing, like with magic, if Charlotte wants to, she can cast spells at a higher level, one step up above her own level. So we'll see if that happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of mostly what I wanted to talk about for this tavern talk. I guess turn it over to both of you. Do either of you have anything you want to discuss other than what we've just talked about?
The only thing for me was the random generation, which was great fun. Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
But it kind of for me, I found out that even though you kind of get the ranger that's a pathfinder, actually, if it wasn't for the freebie points, I wouldn't have had any points in survival, which is awful because it's like you're a pathfinder ranger, no survival. But overall, I thought that it was a really nice way of, because I think I was talking to someone on Discord about it. It was a really nice way of creating characters. I'm a big fan of sort of majority being random, because then it means you're not set with your usual kind of character you might normally play. So
yeah,
I thought that was quite nice. And I think we were also talking about, someone said it actually felt like we were already partying as a group originally.
Right.
And that was quite nice. So it was actually quite nice to hear them say that, because it felt that we were actually had previous adventures and we're just kind of like slap bang in the middle of this one. So that was quite nice.
And the kind of interesting element of that is that if you were to ignore Eric, we're basically all but one of our cult group. So before we came across Arlek in the game, that's why I think the kind of party felt fairly comfortable together, is because the three of you had already been playing in a campaign together. Eric is a new player to kind of join our group, our coven. But also we had him as a PC, also being as like an extra person to join the party. And I think that was kind of a nice little kind of crossover between reality and our game, where it kind of made things maybe feel a little bit more natural too. So
nice,
that really helped.
Yeah, it kind of I think that also helped a lot with setting the tone, with making it feel a bit more natural. So
that'll go a long way in the upcoming sessions.
Yeah. Eric,
assuming we all survive. Anything
you wanted to talk about?
No, I mean, I think this is, I think we covered a lot of the stuff I had in mind. The character generation, just to plus one that for a second is, especially if you're new to a setting, like having this ability to sort of root yourself into it immediately to life path generation is so valuable.
Definitely.
You don't have to think too much when you're doing it either, so that's quite nice to. If you're new, if you've never played it before, then you've got your character. It's done and dusted. Especially the way everyone meets, I think that's really good. The way we did that, that's really helpful. I know when I ran it, it was really helpful to get the group to make that role. To go, here's your back history already. It's done and dusted. You're all in a tavern and someone comes in.
It's not hyper detailed. You can kind of mold it to be whatever you want, but it gives you something to work with.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Solomon Kane is asking about the DM prep.
So we discussed this at the very beginning of this episode. So if you when we're finished, if you want to go back and listen to that, the first thing I talked about was my prep for this session. So if I just want to put a number on it, I probably spent about a half an hour ish of prep in the things that I did. However, saying that, I have a OneNote notebook which has effectively everything from the player's handbook and the GM's guide screenshotted and pasted in there, which took me days to make. But I did that I think a year ago, because I was running a campaign for I was running a session for someone somewhere. It's for Nord Saga. Last year I was doing Nord Saga, which is my own little game, at a convention. And I was also before the convention, I was doing some online games of it as well. And because I was using, it is a Forbidden Lands hack. I had the entire content of the Forbidden Lands book basically in OneNote, so I could access it really quickly. So I already had it there. I just copied it, and then I put all the Ravenland specific stuff, added that in as well. So that meant it took a long time. That took a long time, but it's only a one-off thing for the campaign, and not everyone's going to do that. The other thing I had to do, because this is streaming, which most people won't do, is setting up all the tools and stuff, and that took a hell of a lot of time.
I'm sure that's a lot more, yeah.
And that was basically the bulk of my prep, was making sure the tools were working properly and that we wouldn't have technical problems. But yeah, actual game prep was probably about 30 minutes or so, ish.
And it's not directly related, but speaking about Forbidden Lands generally, as someone who runs it, a few things that really cut down on prep time for this game is, one, we were talking about, the number of tables and things that are there, which are great tools, but also NPC stats are so simple to improvise in this game. You take a base, you figure you have some NPC, they're average at X, Y, and Z, and maybe they're above average at saying, okay, they have a 4, right?
Yeah.
You go down to their skills. Typically, you're not going to give higher. This is a 1, 2, 3, and you're done. You can just do it in 3 seconds there at the table on an index card is what I tend to do. And that's it. It's very simple. You don't tend, some people do, obviously. Some people really like battle maps and stuff, but generally you don't need that. Last night I had to, I wanted to give a quick sketch of a location where they are, and I just scribbled something on Roll20. And it's a very easy game to run very low prep, and that in itself is a big recommendation.
I think it's pretty much the same with the others, isn't it? From Free League, they're all very similar. Yeah, especially with Mutant Zero.
Yeah, I think the difference with this one, as I said at the beginning of the video, is if you're doing published adventure sites, and then it takes a bit longer. But yeah. So for episode 1, I wasn't planning on using any. For episode 2, because we're only doing 2-hour sessions, and we're going to be slowing the pace down to be explaining things as we go. This is our first combat, so it's probably going to be most of the first session. I would imagine probably at least half of it will be taken up with that, because we'll be breaking everything down. Harry, who's playing Kark the Goblin, he's not even read the rules, so it's gonna be I'm gonna have to explain it to him, which is good. And I told him do not read if you haven't read the rules, don't read them, because this is perfect. Because I want to be explaining it anyway. So if I have to explain it to you, then I'm also slowing the pace down anyway, which is what we want. So so the combat is probably going to take a little bit longer than it might do if people are familiar with the game. But prep for that, I'm not planning on doing a battle map. I might pull up a map for just general placement and use Gtove, the online, the virtual tabletop I was using in the first session. This cool 3D one, and there'll be minis for that, and a map. I've actually found a battle map I can use for the kind of the scenario we're in, but cool. I'm not gonna be using it like a battle map necessarily. It's mainly gonna be for placement of things, if people want to know who's where. Although there's a very slippery
where
slope.
My body will be found,
because I used to do a lot of battle map combats in my previous going back a few years. I used to love battle maps. I used to love getting out, getting the minis and stuff. So I'm a little bit worried that if I put a battle map on the tabletop and put minis on it, that it's gonna be a proper battle map combat. And I don't think that's necessarily the best way to run Forbidden Lands, because I've run Forbidden Lands a lot and I've never used a battle map for it. Other than once at the convention game when there was a village and there was a bear creature in the village, a bear again, and because it was like a bear covered in mist. It was like a kind of corrupted bear, and they were never sure exactly where it was. So it kind of helped to have a map of the village and say, this is roughly where you are. This is where the bear is. And then basically they were moving around, and we kind of used it a little bit like a battle map every round, but we weren't measuring like distances or anything like that. There was no grid. There was nothing like that, but it was kind of useful in that instance. Yeah. And that's where I'm tempted to use it more than anything. So we'll see what happens. I don't know.
I mean, I look forward to seeing it just because so far I'm impressed with like how the map looks on Cheetos. So I just want to see what else it does. But yeah.
Cool. Any other questions from anybody in chat? Go ahead and throw them our way. We've got about 10 minutes to go, so if there aren't any more that come up, then I'm quite happy to end it fairly soon. How many people have we got watching? 9. Okay, cool. One
thing, I mean, while we're waiting, I wanted to say is you don't really have to worry, I don't think, too much about me going through too many more random encounters in the Ravenland, because hopefully in the next month my players will be in a better reach. It'll be a whole new table.
How many sessions have you had in Ravenlands?
Not that many. So this is sort of like a newish campaign. So I think we're like game time, we're like 2 weeks in. I can't remember how many sessions it's been.
Roughly.
10.
Okay.
Maybe. Yeah.
And how many?
One of my players, I think, is gonna be listening to this. He'll correct me.
How many random encounters have you done roughly?
How many random encounters have I done? So one's from the book. Let's see. So we did one last night, which is like finding something in the wilderness, and in this case, it was like a cabin for like an old couple, right? So that we've also had. How can I put this sort of vaguely? One involving.
I don't even know what they were. I just kind of just okay, yeah.
And
in a tree, a dwarf in a tree.
Yes, exactly. Yep. One involving a dwarf in a tree.
That's a kind of it's a signature one. Don't worry.
Yeah. And what else? I mean, I haven't used a whole bunch. Typically, I tend to do my own things. Like I tend to see that there's an encounter, I either riff off of it or do my own thing.
Yeah.
But a couple of them I've been just trying to put in directly and see what happens.
Okay.
And generally they just walk away from it and it didn't exist.
Okay.
So we've got another question from August Tell. Do you use random tables for finding loot for explore activity?
Yes.
There's some great tables in Forbidden Lands in the GM's guide for loot. Several tables, in fact. So we use them. I will be using them for loot. There's gonna be a combat with Saurians. Assuming that the PCs don't turn tail and run, or they don't all die, and they kill some Saurians, they'll be able to loot their bodies. And
some Saurians. Sorry, what? I thought there was just the one. I'm out here.
Whoa! Spoilers.
There's only one.
You know that there was more than one, right? So I'm not.
I've only got a bow, right?
I'm just trying to find the page in the GM's guide here. Treasure and Find. So it's on page 186. Starts on page 186 of the GM's guide. There's a little section called Treasures and Finds, or Treasure and Finds. And here are the number of tables. You have simple carried finds. So things you would find carried on a person's with like simple things. So that just a normal person.
Not a bronze mirror.
No, not a bronze mirror.
Not like the old D&D ones.
You also, for carried items, for carried finds, you also have valuable items and precious items. So depending on the type of person it is, those are the things you can find. Then you have exactly the same 3 separate tables for each of these, by the way, for what you would find in a lair. And that's where, like, for example, simple finds in a lair. If you roll a 66, you find a bronze statue. It weighs 6, which is fucking heavy, right? And yeah, that's kind of cool. Like, you wouldn't find that on a person. Like, you would be like, I'm gonna rifle through their pockets. You find a bronze statue that weighs 6. It'd be like, no, you would have fucking seen that on the guy's back as he's like, carrying this fucking statue everywhere. So anyway, we're using those. 186 in the GM's guide. They're really good. They got a lot of flavor. They're tailored to this setting, so definitely use them. Don't look up anything else. Did finish hunting and cooking. Do you roll a d6 to see how much meat you get? Yes, you roll d6 to find out what you've actually, when you're doing a hunt, you're successful. You roll a d6 to figure out what animal you find, and those animals have a certain number of pelts. Like a pelt unit and a food unit, and so kind of in a way you do that. You don't roll.
I think you might be asking if you have the chef talent, how many units of food you're able to cook.
I can't remember offhand. I'd have to look it up again.
It is random.
I think you do roll. I think you do roll it. And the idea is that that's how many of the units that you're cooking you're able to turn into rations. So I would roll it with a. If anyone takes a chef talent, I would make a d6 roll for that. Wild boar, 4 meat, for example. Yep, from the book. Yeah. So you'd have 4 meat, and you would roll a d. Is it a d6? Oh God.
So it depends on what you're using. So if you actually have equipment for it, you can get like a higher number. Like if you're using a field kitchen or a cauldron.
Yeah.
But with just the base talent, you get a d6. So say a boar has 4 meat, you roll a 1, you only get 1.
Oh, okay. So
you could eat the other 3 at the time. It's just you only have 1 into rations.
And then it becomes a d10, d12.
So if you roll a 6 on that, you turn all 4 into rations. So
exactly.
A 4, 5, or 6, you turn them all into rations. Okay.
Okay.
And I think some of the things allow you to get +1 or something. Is that right? Or you get like 1.
So there's like a cauldron, and I think in the errata,
the
second printing, the cauldron does like a d6 +2, and like a field kitchen does 2d6. That's off memory. Those numbers might not be right. But...
I'm not gonna look. I was gonna look it up. I'm not gonna look it up. We'll come to that if we need to come to that. If anyone takes the chef talent, then I'll make sure I'm up to speed on that. Yeah. So we've got another question from Creative Atrophy, which is since the other games that use the Year Zero engine are somewhat compatible, do you plan to port in any rules? We talked about porting in some of the rules from Alien into the consumable dice, for example, but ultimately, because we're trying to keep this as vanilla as possible, we're not going to use it. Although my personal preference is kind of similar to Alien. Alien's a bit harsh, I find. You would have, like, for example, with food, if you have 4 units of food, you roll 4d6. And any of them that come up with a 1, that number of food units are gone. Whereas if you think about Forbidden Lands, you only, like, if you're rolling a d12, there's only going to be 1 that comes up. So it's only going to ever degrade by 1 element each time. So Alien takes it to a whole nother level where if you have a really bad roll, you could roll 4 1s and it's all gone. And I actually, the one time I was a player in the, I can't remember the name of the Chariot of the Gods.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And I was rolling 1s on my air supply roll every single fucking time, and we kind of narrated it that there was like a leak. There was like a leak in my suit or something, and the air was going out, and I had to go back, and I'd turn around and go back and get like a different suit, and then my second suit I started rolling 1s on it again. It was like, oh my fucking God, like this should have like a full amount of air in it. I've checked it. I made sure to check it that there were no leaks or anything, and there weren't any leaks. But then I was rolling badly, and it's like, okay, how do I narrate that this happened? And it was kind of it felt a little bit wrong coming from Forbidden Lands with it. So my way of doing it, if I was to do Alien, or in fact the games that I'm writing myself that are using the Year Zero engine, I'm using that Alien system with using dice. But the idea is that if you roll any 1s, doesn't matter how many, you just degrade 1 step. So it's kind of like a mix between the two. Other than that, are there any other rules I would port in?
The xenomorph critical injury rules from Alien to monsters and Forbidden Lands, that would be so hardcore.
Or the critical tables from fucking Alien, like
oh my God,
Jesus, like it's a harsh game. Like parking Alien to one side, the Coriolis isn't super compatible in terms of rules and base mechanics. Things like Doom, Darkness Points, not Doom. Even the talents are very different. Forbidden Lands really is very different to all the other games. Mutant Year Zero comes the closest, but with things like ranked talents and consumables, and the journeying rules even are on a completely different level to any of the other games. The only thing I could think maybe I would be tempted to port in would be taking Rot or Radiation from Coriolis and doing some sort of corruption in Forbidden Lands, but it's changing the feel of the setting too much.
That's a different,
So
it'd be interesting, but it's different.
It's something I've thought about for. I had to think about doing a Warhammer Fantasy roleplay hack using Forbidden Lands, and that was the easy way to do corruption, which is kind of doing it like Radiation. But yeah, I can't think of anything that I would want to borrow. I know all the games really well, but
here too.
Yeah.
If you're prone in Coriolis, someone shooting at you gets a negative modifier, and
I would do that.
written is not in Forbidden Lands.
I would do that though.
Second one is we were talking about fleeing in Forbidden Lands, and Vaesen has a rule where you can do a chase. That could be useful.
I've not seen it yet, so.
That's true. Yeah, I would definitely use that rule from Vaesen. I actually haven't read it yet, so So that I think there could be an argument for some sort of Overwatch from Coriolis as well, considering that 2 of our party have ranged weapons.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're not automatic weapons or anything like that, but like if they wanted to set up an Overwatch, like they're basically hiding behind a tree, pointing at a specific unit, and everybody walks in front of their line of sight, and they can shoot them, get a free shot off.
Yeah, if you already have
can
it
see that
ready,
working.
then...
Yeah, I mean
that
there's no Overwatch. I don't think there's Overwatch in Forbidden Lands. There isn't.
No,
pretty sure.
No,
I think it's only an Alien and Coriolis. They've added it. No, that's also in Mutant Year Zero, I think, as well.
Oh, cool.
Is it okay?
So it's in the games that have like ranged firearm type weapons.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's more appropriate for that.
So yeah. Otherwise, Forbidden Lands is good enough that we can just use it more or less as written. Vaesen is I know Eric is besotted with it. It's also my favorite of the I haven't actually, it's the one game of all the Year Zero games I haven't run or played. So also I guess it's it's attractive in that respect that I really.
We don't even have the beta document yet. So.
Yeah, but even the alpha's got enough that you could.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Something. I'm just saying.
And I really, really like what's been implemented there. I like everything about it. So, for me, there's a temptation to try and use some stuff in that, but I don't think it's that compatible with Forbidden Lands. So,
yeah.
Oh, one thing I would discuss is from the OGL. So this is kind of sort of like using stuff from the other Year Zero games. There's a comprehend skill in the OGL. And I've always felt that the lore role in Forbidden Lands is fairly narrow in its focus, and that it's only used for like finding out legends and nothing else. And the comprehend skill in the OGL is much more open ended, and I'm tempted to add allow people. In fact, we did do this in episode 1, where Arlek was able to make a lore roll to find out. But it kind of makes sense because it was about a legend.
We kind of made it into it, so. But
it's also, I think, thinking about Mutant Year Zero and know the zone is the kind of equivalent skill. Is also like you can know things about things that you see by using lore, and I think that makes sense not just for legends but for a kind of know the zone or know the Ravenlands type of thing.
That makes sense.
So I probably would be using something that's kind of a mix between Mutant Year Zero and the OGL in that respect for that skill. Yeah. So I'm running Raven's Purge, correct? Yep.
That's why
I think we're just past the 1 hour mark, so I think that's a good point to call it a close. So thank you very much for everyone who's been in there and has been chatting to us.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Thanks for the questions.
Yeah, we're gonna try and do this again for every single session. So keep an eye out if you're watching our campaign. If you got any ideas for us coming up or about anything, then feel free to get in touch on all the various social medias. There are links in the description for how to contact us. Discord is probably the one place where all of us are most active. So if you're a Discord user, even if you're not a Discord user, there's not a lot of people in that server. So come and join us, and it's kind of like a chat platform if you don't know about it.
Do. Yeah.
Cool.
We're pretty good about answering really quickly.
Yeah. So
we're just on Discord all the time.
One of us is up at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. So thanks very much, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you very much, Matt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt.
No problem. It's been fun.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Ciao.
Bye.